They say the most effective way to hide a secret is to burn the paper it's written on. But how do you burn the memory of a scream? In the cold, gray winter of 1973, as the world looked toward the ending of the Vietnam War, a man named Richard Helms, the director of the CIA, walked into a secure room at Langley and issued a command that should have changed the course of American history forever. He ordered the total destruction of every document, every file, and every scrap of evidence related to a project that had been operating in the shadows for over 2 decades. As the industrial shredders whirred into life, turning thousands of pages of human suffering into unreadable confetti, the CIA thought they had successfully erased their darkest sin. They thought they had buried the ghost of MKUltra. But secrets have a way of surviving the fire, and what they tried to erase was not just a program, it was a terrifying blueprint for the conquest of the human soul. To understand how a democratic nation turned its own citizens into lab rats, we have to travel back to a time when the world was divided by an iron curtain, and the fear of a mind control gap was more terrifying than the nuclear bomb. It began in the aftermath of World War II under the banner of Operation Paperclip. The United States didn't just win the war, they inherited its demons. They brought over Nazi scientists, men who had spent years peering into the abyss of human endurance in concentration camps, and gave them new identities, new laboratories, and a new mission: find a way to break the human mind and rebuild it. The logic was cold, calculated, and devoid of a heartbeat. If the Soviets were developing brainwashing techniques to turn captured American soldiers into sleeper agents, then the United States had to get there first. They called it Project Bluebird, then Project Artichoke, but it would eventually morph into the monster we now know as MKUltra. Imagine a world where your morning coffee, your doctor's visit, or even a casual walk in a park could be the beginning of a nightmare from which you can never wake up. The man at the center of this web was Sidney Gottlieb, a chemist with a clubfoot and a stutter who loved American folk dancing and lived in an eco-friendly cabin, yet spent his days presiding over the most horrific chemical warfare against his own people. Gottlieb was the black sorcerer of the CIA. He didn't just want to interrogate people, he wanted to empty them. He wanted to find a Manchurian candidate, a human being whose identity could be wiped clean and replaced with a programmed set of instructions, a living weapon that would kill on command and have no memory of the act. To achieve this, the CIA turned the entire North American continent into a clandestine laboratory. They didn't just target prisoners or the marginalized, they went after the unsuspecting middle class, the students, and even their own officers. In the mid-1950s, under a sub-project chillingly titled Operation Midnight Climax, the CIA set up safe houses in San Francisco and New York. They hired prostitutes to lure men back to these apartments, which were fitted with one-way mirrors and hidden microphones. As the agents sat behind the glass, sipping martinis and watching like perverted voyeurs, the unsuspecting men were dosed with massive amounts of LSD. They were watched as they spiraled into drug-induced psychosis, their minds fracturing in real time. There were no doctors, no consent forms, and no medical help if things went wrong. For the CIA, these men were not human beings. They were expendable assets in a high-stakes game of psychological chess. The agency wanted to see if they could use sex and drugs to extract secrets or plant suggestions. They were looking for the click, that moment when the mind snaps and the personality becomes malleable. But the darkness went much deeper than drugs. The program expanded into the realms of electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation, and ultrasound. In the cold corridors of the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Dr. Ewan Cameron, a man who would later become the president of the World Psychiatric Association, was funded by the CIA to conduct psychic driving experiments. He would take patients who had checked in for minor issues like postpartum depression or anxiety and subject them to a living hell. He would put them into drug-induced comas for weeks at a time, playing looped tapes under their pillows that repeated the same phrases hundreds of thousands of times. He blasted their brains with electroshock therapy at levels 30 to 40 times the normal clinical dose, effectively wiping their memories clean until they forgot how to speak, how to eat, or even who their own children were. He was trying to de-pattern them, to turn them into blank slates upon which the CIA could write a new reality. The human cost was staggering, and the casualties were often hidden behind layers of national security. Take the case of Frank Olson, a brilliant CIA scientist who specialized in biological weapons. In 1953, during a retreat at Deep Creek Lake, Gottlieb slipped LSD into Frank Olson's Cointreau. Olson, who was already struggling with the morality of his work, spiraled into a deep depression and paranoia. Days later, he allegedly plunged out of a 13th floor window of the Statler Hotel in New York City. The CIA called it a suicide, a tragic accident of a troubled mind, but for decades his family fought for the truth, eventually uncovering evidence that Olson may have been murdered because he was about to blow the whistle on the program. He was a man who knew too much, a man who had seen the abyss and couldn't look away, and in the world of MKUltra, the only way to silence a conscience was to extinguish the life attached to it. As the years rolled on, the program didn't stop, it evolved. It moved from the physical to the invisible. They began experimenting with electromagnetic frequencies, trying to see if they could beam voices into people's heads or induce heart attacks from a distance. They looked into the power of hypnosis, searching for a way to create triggered assassins who would remain dormant for years until a specific word or phrase was spoken over a telephone line. The line between science fiction and state-sponsored terror blurred until it disappeared entirely. The agency was obsessed with the idea of total control, not just of territory, but of the very essence of what makes us human, our thoughts, our memories, and our will. When the Church Committee finally began to peel back the layers of this rotten onion in the late 1970s, the American public was horrified. They saw a glimpse of a government that had bypassed every ethical boundary, every constitutional protection, and every shred of human decency in the name of security. But the most chilling realization wasn't what was found, it was what was missing. Because of Richard Helm's shredders, we will never know the full extent of the horror. We will never know the names of the thousands of ghost victims who disappeared into psychiatric wards or took their own lives, never knowing that their minds had been tampered with by the very government sworn to protect them. The 20,000 pages that were accidentally discovered in 1977 due to a financial filing error were just the tip of a massive frozen iceberg. But here's the most uncomfortable truth, the one that lingers in the silence of the present day. The CIA didn't stop their research because it was immoral. They stopped it because they found more efficient ways to do it. The techniques developed in those dark rooms, the isolation, the sleep deprivation, the psychological breaking points didn't vanish, they were refined. They showed up again in the enhanced interrogation rooms of black sites in the 2000s. And in the digital age, the quest for mind control has moved from the needle to the screen. We are now living in a world of algorithmic manipulation, where our thoughts are shaped by invisible hands, where our biases are harvested and our fears are weaponized by data-driven psychological profiles. The Manchurian Candidate is no longer a single soldier. It is a society tuned to a specific frequency of outrage and compliance. As we look back at the program America tried to erase, we have to ask ourselves, can you ever truly kill an idea? The CIA proved that the human mind is fragile, that it can be broken, rewired, and manipulated. They showed us that under the right pressure, the self is an illusion that can be dissolved in a glass of water or a burst of electricity. The ghost of MKUltra isn't just a historical footnote, it is a warning. It is a reminder that the greatest threat to freedom isn't an invading army, but the silent erosion of the sanctity of the human mind. The files may be gone, the witnesses may be dead, and the buildings may have been torn down, but the technology of control is very much alive. It sits in our pockets, it watches us through our cameras, and it waits for the next command. The most terrifying part of the CIA's experiment wasn't that they failed to control the mind, it was how much they actually succeeded. They learned that if you control the information a person receives, you control their reality. And in a world where reality is increasingly manufactured, we must wonder if we are the masters of our own thoughts, or if we are all just the unintended legacy of a program that was never truly meant to end. The fire at Langley may have burned the paper, but the smoke still hangs heavy over the world, a constant, choking reminder that the battle for your soul is the one war that never saw a ceasefire. This narrative isn't just about a rogue agency or a bygone era of the Cold War. It is a mirror held up to the face of modern civilization. When we look at the history of MKUltra, we aren't just looking at the past, we are looking at the foundational architecture of the present. The program America tried to erase wasn't a failure, it was a terrifyingly successful proof of concept. It taught the powers that be that the most effective cage is the one you cannot see, the one built inside the folds of your own gray matter. As you walk away from this story, ask yourself, in an era of deepfakes, echo chambers, and neuromarketing, where does the CIA's experiment end and your free will begin? Perhaps the ultimate goal of MKUltra wasn't to create a single assassin, but to create a world where truth is so fragmented that the mind gives up and looks for a master to follow. The shadows of Langley are long, and they reach far into the 21st century. The program may have been erased, but the blueprint remains, etched into the very fabric of our connected lives, waiting for the next black sorcerer to turn the dial. Stay awake, stay questioning, because the most dangerous experiment is the one you don't even know you're a part of. The transition from chemical manipulation to electronic control wasn't just a change in technology, it was a shift in the very philosophy of power. While the LSD experiments of the 50s were chaotic and often unpredictable, the CIA sought a more surgical approach to the human soul. They began to view the brain not as a biological organ, but as a biological computer, one that could be hacked, reprogrammed, and hardwired for obedience. To do this, they needed more than just doctors, they needed architects of trauma. They moved their operations from the back rooms of hospitals to highly secretive facilities tucked away in the American suburbs, places where the neighbors saw nothing but a quiet government building, never knowing that behind those soundproofed walls, the very definition of humanity was being dismantled. Think of a young woman in 1962, perhaps a student at a prestigious university, who begins experiencing mild insomnia. She is referred to a clinic that, unknown to her, is a CIA front. She enters a room painted a neutral, calming gray. She is greeted by a man in a crisp white lab coat, a father figure, a man of science. He speaks in soothing tones as he attaches cold metallic electrodes to her temples. He tells her this is a new, cutting-edge treatment, but as the switch is thrown, her world dissolves into a blinding white flash of pain. This wasn't treatment, it was deep sleep therapy. For the next 20 days, she would be kept in a drug-induced coma, fed through tubes and subjected to looping. A tape recorder under her pillow would play a single sentence over and over. "You are nothing without us. You will do as you are told. Your past is a lie." By the time she was allowed to wake up, her original personality had been shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. She didn't just lose her memory, she lost the I that made her a person.
The CIA's obsession with the blank slate led them to some of the most grotesque experiments in human history. They began to experiment with sensory deprivation tanks, dark, silent chambers where a person would float in salt water for hours, stripped of sight, sound, and touch. In total isolation, the brain begins to hallucinate, desperate for any input. This is when the programming would begin. The agents found that a mind starved of reality would cling to whatever new reality was provided to it. They were building a psychological Babel where they could dismantle a person's language and replace it with a code. They wanted a soldier who could sit across from an enemy interrogator and honestly believe he was someone else, only to have his true mission activated by a specific trigger, a nursery rhyme, a certain brand of cigarette, or a flash of light. But as the 60s bled into the 70s, the program's focus shifted toward the invisible. The CIA became fascinated with the idea of radio-hypnotic intracerebral control. Documents that survived the shredders hinted experiments involving miniature transmitters implanted in the teeth or the ear canals of unwitting subjects. They were exploring the Fry effect, the phenomenon where certain microwave frequencies can cause a person to hear voices inside their head that no one else can hear. Imagine the power of a government that can make its enemies believe they are going insane, hearing the voice of God or a demon commanding them to commit acts of violence. This wasn't just about gathering intelligence, it was about the ultimate form of gaslighting, making a human being a stranger to their own mind. The scale of this operation was global, from the black sites in post-war Germany to the remote villages in Southeast Asia during the Phoenix program. The CIA was testing the limits of human endurance. They discovered that trauma, when applied precisely, creates a dissociative barrier. When a child or an adult experiences a horror so profound that the mind cannot process it, the brain creates a compartment to hide that memory. The CIA's goal was to master the creation of these compartments. They wanted to build a mental filing cabinet where they could store top-secret information in a part of the brain that the subject themselves couldn't even access without a code. They were literally trying to turn the human brain into a secure hard drive. As we look at the ruins of these programs, we must confront the uncomfortable reality that many of the monsters we fear in history were actually prototypes. The technology of mass persuasion, the use of fear to bypass the prefrontal cortex, and the systematic destruction of shared truth, these are all the children of MKUltra. When the program was officially shut down in 1973, it didn't die, it just went off-book. It moved into the private sector, into the world of defense contractors and shadow corporations, where there is no congressional oversight and no Freedom of Information Act. The experiments didn't stop, they just got better at hiding. Today, the safe houses are no longer apartments in San Francisco. They are the digital platforms we use every day. We are being dosed, not with LSD, but with dopamine-triggering algorithms designed to keep us in a state of constant emotional agitation. We are being looped with 24-hour news cycles that repeat the same narratives until they become our only reality. The sensory deprivation is now a digital bubble where we only hear voices that agree with our own, slowly de-patterning our ability to think critically or empathize with the other. The CIA's dream of a programmable society is closer to reality today than it ever was in the 1960s. We have become our own programmers, willingly surrendering our mental sovereignty to the ghost in the machine. The story of the program America tried to erase is not a closed chapter. It is a living, breathing warning. Every time we trade our privacy for convenience, every time we allow fear to dictate our logic, and every time we ignore the suffering of the expendable for the sake of national security, we are feeding the beast that Gottlieb and Helms created. The documents may have been shredded, but the methodology remains. The question is no longer, what did they do to us, but rather, what are we doing to ourselves? The ultimate experiment of MKUltra was to see if a free people could be convinced to build their own cages. And as we look around at a world of divided realities and manufactured truths, it's hard to argue that they didn't succeed. The machinery of the state is designed to be permanent, but the men who run it are obsessed with the ephemeral. In 1977,
4 years after the great purging of the MKUltra files, a low-level clerk at the CIA's financial archives stumbled upon a stack of boxes that had been mislabeled. While Richard Helms had ordered the destruction of the operational files, the records of what they did, he had forgotten about the money. Those boxes contained 20,000 pages of financial records, receipts for drugs, payments to universities, and vouchers for the disposal of human assets. These cold, bureaucratic numbers were the blood-stained receipts of a 2-decade-long war against the American mind. When Senator Frank Church and his committee began to pull on this thread, the tapestry of American exceptionalism began to unravel, revealing a skeletal structure of ethical decay that shook the nation to its core. But the hearings were a hollow victory. The men who had overseen the horrors, men like Sidney Gottlieb, were allowed to retire to their quiet lives, their secrets mostly intact, while the victims were left to rot in the silence of their own shattered memories. There was no grand apology, no reparations for the families of those whose lives had been erased. The CIA simply pivoted. They realized that the scandal wasn't that they were doing the experiments. The scandal was that they were doing them poorly enough to be caught. The lesson they learned in 1977 wasn't one of morality, but one of camouflage. The program didn't end, it just went off book. It moved into the private sector, into the world of defense contractors and shadow corporations, where there is no congressional oversight and no Freedom of Information Act. The experiments didn't stop, they just got better at hiding. Today, the safe houses are no longer apartments in San Francisco. They are the digital platforms we use every day. We are being dosed, not with LSD, but with dopamine-triggering algorithms designed to keep us in a state of constant emotional agitation. We are being looped with 24-hour news cycles that repeat the same narratives until they become our only reality. The sensory deprivation is now a digital bubble where we only hear voices that agree with our own, slowly de-patterning our ability to think critically or empathize with the other. The CIA's dream of a programmable society is closer to reality today than it ever was in the 1960s. We have become our own programmers, willingly surrendering our mental sovereignty to the ghost in the machine.
Consider the modern digital landscape. The algorithms that dictate what you see, what you fear, and what you desire are the direct descendants of the CIA's psychological profiles. The echo chamber is merely a digital version of the sensory deprivation tank, a space where no outside information can penetrate, where your existing biases are looped and amplified until your personality is de-patterned from the rest of society. We are living in a continuous, high-speed MKUltra experiment, conducted not by men in lab coats, but by lines of code and massive data farms. The black sorcerers of the 1950s would be envious of the precision with which modern technology can trigger a dopamine hit or a cortisol spike in millions of people simultaneously. The tragedy of the program America tried to erase is that it succeeded in a way no one expected. It succeeded in making the public cynical enough to stop caring. We hear the stories of the CIA's crimes and we treat them like entertainment, a plot point in a spy thriller or a conspiracy theory to be discussed over coffee. But the reality is that the Manchurian Candidate is not a sleeper agent waiting for a phone call. It is a society that has been conditioned to accept the unacceptable. It is a world where the trauma of the past is used as the blueprint for the manipulation of the future. The CIA didn't just try to erase their documents, they tried to erase our collective ability to be outraged. As we stand at the precipice of a new era, an era of Neuralink, advanced AI, and bio-digital convergence, the ghost of MKUltra looms larger than ever. The quest for total control has moved from the basement of a psychiatric ward to the silicon chips that may soon be integrated into our very biology.
The line between the human mind and the machine is thinning, and the hands that hold the controls are the same hands that sought to weaponize the human soul 60 years ago. The experiments of the past were just the beta tests for the world we are now entering. The story of MKUltra is not a story of a rogue agency or a dark chapter that is now closed. It is the story of an ongoing ambition. It is the story of the relentless pursuit of the God key, the ability to unlock and rewrite the human experience. The documents were burned, the witnesses are gone, and the buildings have been renamed, but the ambition remains. It lives in the shadows of our institutions, in the subtext of our media, and in the very way we are being taught to perceive ourselves. The true ending of this story hasn't been written yet, because you are the subject. The experiment is still running. Every time you choose convenience over privacy, every time you accept a manufactured narrative without question, and every time you look away from the suffering of the expendable for the sake of your own comfort, the ghost of Sidney Gottlieb smiles. The program America tried to erase didn't disappear, it just became the air we breathe. The question that remains, the one that should keep you awake long after the screen goes dark, is simple. If your mind was being rewritten right now, would you even have the tools left to notice? The fire at Langley didn't kill the ghost, it just gave it the cover of smoke. And in that smoke, the experiment continues, silent and invisible, waiting for the next command to be whispered into the ear of a world that has forgotten how to listen to its own soul. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more hidden history, real mysteries, and untold stories. Let us know in the comments what kind of story you'd like to see next. Your ideas help shape future videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.